Hey guys, so I know a lot of you guys have been waiting for the Kineticist teamwork build, and as I'm recording this video, the tier 2 patrons got one, but I didn't want to just do one for them, so this is for everybody. I'm sorry this took me so long, but I did want to cover at least some videos for the Starfinder people coming over to Pathfinder, because that is a big deal. Anyway, there's a lot to cover just because of how the Kineticist works. So let's dive right into this.
So first up, of course, is our ancestry. And for this build, the best one is definitely going to be the dwarf. But we are going to need our charisma for this build. So that means we're going to be taking the 2 free boosts rather than the normal boosts for the dwarf. We don't need our charisma to be super high in the beginning, but we need it to be at least 14. And of course, we are building a Kineticist. And we're going to be going with dual gates for metal and wood, as we will need both of those to be as defensive as possible. You can go with any background you want here as long as you get the stats you need, but I went with a new one called Crystal Healer. That, of course, gives us natural medicine, which means we don't need to be any higher than experts in medicine. You know, for the skill feats. The starting stats for this build should be Strength 14, Dexterity 12, Constitution 18, Intelligence 10, Wisdom 10, and Charisma 14. And of course, as a Kineticist, we get 3 feats at the very beginning at level 1. 2 of them have to be Impulse feats, and we need 1 from each of our elements. First up, for our class feats that can be anything, we're going to end up taking Weapon Infusion. What's important here is that ranged option, as that will give us more range on our ranged elemental blasts. As we are going to be slow as a dwarf, so having more range could help. The traits we can get on our melee kinetic blasts are going to help too, especially that agile and that reach traits. Moving on, for our metal impulse, because we have to pick one of those, we're going to go with metal carapace. We definitely want to focus on melee in this build. That means we are definitely going to need more than light armor, especially since our dex is going to be pretty low. So this will give us armor and a shield. But don't worry, we can still 100% use kinetic blasts with our shield hand. Unfortunately, if we get crit, we end up losing the benefits of this feat, at least until we can reactivate it. But that's why we have other defensive options later in this build. In particular, we're going to be taking quite a few feats that will increase our HP. And for our wood impulse, we're going to be taking Timber Sentinel. That will allow us to cast Protector Tree at a rank equal to what it would be if we were a spellcaster. That will let us protect allies even if we can't be right near them. And finally, our ancestry feat for level 1 is going to be Rock Runner. This feat itself isn't hugely important. However, we do need it for a feat that is important that we're going to get at level 5. Okay, at level 2, we'll take Fresh Produce. We want to heal and defend in this build, and this does some pretty nice healing. The void damage resistance is pretty situational, but this does allow you to heal during combat, which is pretty handy. Now let's talk about why we need our charisma to be 14. We are going to be taking the champion dedication here. That is going to give us access to a lot of feats that are going to help us with our defenses, especially the next free archetype feat we're going to take, but I'll get to that in a second. For our general feats starting at level 3, toughness is going to be hugely important for this build. You want to pick that up first. Then, of course, you will want to take Die Hard and Canny Acumen for your will save. We'll also want to pick up Shield Block and Incredible Initiative. While we don't need Shield Block to block with our shield that we make from our metal carapace, we do need it for a couple of champion feats we're going to be taking. And Incredible Initiative is just so we have a better chance of going first, so we can get right in there and defend our allies, as we won't be any good to them if we can't take damage for them. Which brings us to level 4. We're going to want to take safe elements here. We have a few impulse feats in this build that could hurt our allies, so we need to be able to make them immune to those. And Pacifying Infusion is a good thing to do in certain situations. As a Kineticist, we do get 8 plus our Con modifier for hit points. That means we have just enough to meet the prerequisites for Champion Resiliency, giving us 3 more hit points for every champion feat we have. We are going to be taking 1 more feat that'll give us even more hit points, but we'll talk about that later in this video. At level 5, unlike in other classes, we do get an impulse feat. We also get a gate junction. For our impulse feat at this level, we're going to be taking Ravel of Thorns. This stance will make it much harder for enemies to get past us. But this would affect our allies, which is why we took safe elements. As by the end of this, our kinetic aura is going to be huge. And for our gate junction, we're going to go with the Wood Critical Blast, as that will immobilize foes on a crit, making it even harder for them to get to our allies. And of course, we can't forget about our Ancestry feat at this level. We're going to pick up Boulder Roll, as that will let us push enemies further away from allies. For today's first teamwork reports, unfortunately, we're not going to have as much of an AC as a full champion. And remember, if we get crit, we lose our armor. However, that's why we're taking so many feats that will increase our hit points. We also are going to be taking some impulses that will help our defense as well as our allies' defense. That's also why Timber Sentinel is so important, because that can offset some of the damage of crits, which this build is very weak to. And we will be able to heal ourselves and allies with fresh produce, and other healing feats we're going to take later. But the main strategy for this build is to go into melee, use our defensive impulses to help us out and our allies, and use melee kinetic blasts. Granted, most turns we're probably only going to get off 1 kinetic blast, but it's more important to set up the defensive options anyway, because this build is 100% about defense, not offense. At level 6, it's time for a dash of herbs to heal even more and treat some of the most debilitating conditions in Pathfinder 2e, especially that sickened condition. Then we're going to take Divine Ally for Shield Ally to give our shield even more hit points, as it should count as a Rusty Steel Shield for all purposes. If I'm wrong here and it doesn't work like that in your game, then you're going to want to take something else here. Try to pick a defensive option for either yourself or other party members, because they'll both help out. Drifting Pollen is another reason that we need safe elements, as this can affect allies as well, because we only want our enemies sickened by this feat, not our allies. We do need to take basic devotion so we can take advanced devotion for other champion feats later, so we need to pick up Divine Grace. Honestly, there isn't a great champion first or second level feat here, and Divine Grace is going to help us with our saves. So for our level 9 impulse feat, we're going to take Sanguivalent Roots. This allows us to damage enemies in our kinetic aura, while at the same time healing our allies that are in our aura, making this another great healing option. And for our gate junction, we're going to take the Metal Aura Junction, as that will make certain enemies in our aura less accurate and easier to hit. Then, of course, at level 9, if you played this game before, you probably saw this coming, but we're going to be taking Mountain Stoutness for even more hit points. At level 10, we're going to be taking Aura Shaping to make our kinetic aura as large as possible. Then we will want to take our Champion's Reaction, because that'll pair extremely well with our Timber Sentinel we got at level 1. I should have said this before, but we want to take either Redeemer or Liberator as our cause, as Paladin really won't help us much. Next we want to take Shatter Shields, to give you and your allies a little more defense. And Shield Warden will let us use our shield to protect allies rather than just ourselves. For our level 13 Impulse feat, we're going to take the Composite Impulse Elemental Artillery. This is so we can ranged attack enemies that are outside of our kinetic aura, as this has a range of 120 feet, whereas our Elemental Blasts only have a range of 30 feet. Plus, this can do more damage than a 2-action ranged Elemental Blast. So yeah, we definitely need this. And for our Gate Junction, we're going to be taking the Metal Elemental Resistance, as we do need an elemental resistance, and electricity is a lot more prominent than poison. And for our level 13 Ancestry feat, we're going to take Wooden Mantle. Mantle of the Unwavering Heart just has so many applications for this build, it's ridiculous. Next, we will take Rapid Reattunement, because there's going to be some situations where we will need to change our impulse feats, and we want to do that as quickly as possible. Then Healing Touch, so we can get Lay on Hands for guaranteed healing rather than having to roll. Imperious Aura will let us go right into one of our stances at the beginning of our turn without having to spend an action. And Quick Shield Block will let us use our Champion's reaction and the Shield Block reaction in the same round. At level 17, we have a very important impulse feat with Alloy, Flesh, and Steel. This will give us more damage on our Elemental Blast, but more importantly, it gives us 2 defensive things. First, it gives us resistance 10 to physical damage except adamantine. Second, it gives us immunity to quite a lot of things. And lastly, it lets us raise our metal shield if we have it active. We can use this, raise our shield, and still do a 1-action Elemental Blast, which is very handy. For our Gate Junction, we're going to take the Metal Skill Junction. That will give us quick crafting, allowing us to repair our shield on the fly. And for our last Ancestry feat, we're going to take Wood Ward, as that will give us another defensive option for when we get crit and lose our armor. We have basically everything we need from the champion archetype, so it doesn't really matter what feats you take for the last 2 free archetype feats. However, for level 18, we will want to take Turn the Wheel of Seasons. All of the seasons have great applications for this build depending on the situation. You do have to use all of the seasons in order, but you can start anywhere you want, making this a great option for this build. And the last feat I'm going to cover in this video is going to be Omnikinesis. This allows us to replace our impulse feats for 1 action rather than having to spend 10 minutes. Granted, we can only do 1 at a time, but at least it's better than having to spend 10 minutes, right? For today's second team report, if you don't have the free archetype, then really not much changes. About the only thing is you won't have as many hit points, and you won't be as defensive, and you won't be able to protect your allies as well. But you'll still have plenty of options for doing that, as well as for debuffing enemies. But what's really great about this build is that you can very easily swap impulses. So if you find that one of the impulses from this build isn't working very well, you can just replace it. I know there are a ton of stances in this build, and we can only be in 1 stance at a time. However, each of these stances are for a different situation. Which one you use is going to depend on the situation. For example, you'll want to use Sanguivolent Roots when your allies need healing, or Shatter Shields when they need more AC and resistance. It all depends on what situation you find yourself in, like most of my builds. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed this video, leave a like, and don't forget to check out the Patreon page for exclusive perks. If you want to learn more about the Ardande heritage, you can check out this video here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, teamwork is vital.